Today class we're going to factor trinomials, but this time they won't be trinomials where a is equal to 1. We still need to make sure that we always check for the greatest common factor first among all the terms. And then make sure that your trinomial that you're trying to factor is in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, instead of us just working with C and B, this time A is going to be greater than 1. So let's look at some problems where this is going to be true. So now if we look at this problem right here, we're going to be factoring quadratic trinomials when A is greater than 0. We're going to do this by way of using what is known as the box method. The box method will take you directly to those two binomials that you multiply together to give you your trinomial. In this case, it's going to be 2x squared plus 7x plus 5. So instead of us just working with our B and our C term, now we have to use A and C first. When A is 2 and C is 5, we need two factors of the product of those two numbers, so 10, that will give us a sum of 7x. Now, in order to do that using the box method, the first term, which is your 2x squared term, is going to go in the first box. Your last term, which is C, is going to go in the bottom right box. Now you want to multiply the coefficient of your x squared term and your constant term together. 2 times 5 is 10. So we need two factors of 10 that gives us a sum of that middle term, which is 7x. So let's go and find the factors of 10. 1 and 10. Can you ever add 1 and 10 and end up with 7? Well, 1 plus 10 gives us 11. So this would be 11x. But I need 7x as a sum. So those two terms or factors will not be used. The other factors of 10 are 2 and 5. If I multiply 2 times 5, I end up with 10. And when I add 2 plus 5, I end up with 7, which is what I need, a 7. So therefore, these are the two numbers or factors that I'm going to put in the remaining boxes. And it does not matter which one goes where. But you have to make sure now you put an X behind the two numbers. So in this box, I'm going to write 2x. And in this box, the remaining box, I'm going to write 5x. So if you look diagonally, 2x plus 5x is that 7x. We're almost done. So now we want to factor out the greatest common factor among your columns and your rows. So let's look at the columns first. What is the greatest common factor of 2x and 5x? Well, both of these terms have x's in common. So therefore, that x or that common factor goes above those two boxes, that column. Ask yourself, what does 2x and 5 have in common? Well, the only thing that those two terms have in common is 1. Put it above that column. This term determines what sign is going to go between the x and the 1. And since 2x is positive, this is going to be plus 1. Now we need to look at the greatest common factor among our rows. So you ask yourself, what does 2x squared and 2x both have in common? Well, both of these terms have 2's in common. So I'm going to factor out the 2. X squared and x have x in common. Always take the variable with the least exponent. Factor it out. What does 5x and 5 both have in common? Well, the number or the coefficient that they have is a 5. So that 5 is going to be factored out. And since both of them do not have x's, your greatest common factor among those two terms is just 5. This term, which is my 5x, determines what sign goes between the 2x and the 5. And since 5x is positive, this is going to be plus. So now I'm just going to rewrite my binomials as a product. So my answer should be x plus 1 times 2x plus 5. And it does not matter which binomial goes first and which one goes second. But you want to make sure you check it using FOIL. So I'm going to multiply x times 2x first. X times 2x, that's 2x squared. Outer, x times 5 is plus 5x. Inner, 1 times 2x is plus 2x. Last, 1 times 5 is plus 5. And if you notice, the middle term, when you combine them together, gives me the 7x. So I'll end up with what I started out with, which is 2x squared plus 7x plus 5. It checks out. So my final answer is x plus 1 times 2x plus 5. And both binomials are in their separate parentheses. Now let's look at another one just like that. But this time we want to factor 3y squared plus 14y plus 8. It does not matter what these variables are. They can be x squared and a x. They could be an m squared and an m, as long as those two variables are the same. So I want to ask myself, since my a is 3, I need to multiply 3 times a, 8, and that will give me the number that I'm looking for. So first of all, put 3y squared in the first box. 8 is going to be diagonally across from it in the bottom right box. So now I'm going to multiply 3 times 8. 3 times 8 is 24. So I need 2 factors of 24 that will give me a sum of 14y. So start listing the factors of 24. 1 and 24. If I add these two together, I'll get 25. So that is not going to be used. 2 and 12. 2 plus 12 is 14. 3 and 8. 3 times 8 is 24, but 3 plus 8 is 11. Can't be used. 4 and 6. 4 times 6 is 24. 4 plus 6 is 10. I need 14. 7, 8, and 3 is already there, so I'm done listing my factors. And if you notice, the only 2 factors that I can multiply to give me 24 and add to give me 14 is the 2 and the 12. So I'm going to replace that 2 in the top right hand corner, but I'm going to put a y right behind it. So that's 2y. And then 12 will become 12y. 2y plus 12y is 14y. So now I want to make sure I factor out the greatest common factor among my rows and my columns. So let's start with the rows. What does 3y squared and 12y both have in common? Well, I can divide 3 by 3 and I can divide 12 by 3 evenly, so the coefficient is going to be a 3, put above the column. Y squared and y both have y in common. Take the variable with the least exponent, write it next to the 3. Now I want to make sure I get the greatest common factor among 2y and 8. They both can be divided by 2, so 2 is my greatest common factor. And since 2y is positive, plus is going to go between the two terms. What does 3y squared and 2y both have in common? Well, as far as the number, they have a 1 in common, but the variable would be the y. So I'm going to put it to the left. What does 12y and 8 have in common? Well, 4 times 3 is 12 and 4 times 2 is 8. So they both have 4 in common. And since 12y is positive, plus will go between the two. So my final answer would end up to be y plus 4 as one of my binomials times 3y plus 2. Be sure to check to make sure you get what you started out with. Y times 3y is 3y squared. Y times 2 is 2y. 4 times 3y is 12y. 2y plus 12y is 14y. And then 4 times 2 is 8. Hopefully you're catching on right now. But to make sure that you know exactly what is being done, let's try this next problem. What two numbers will you multiply together to find your factors? Remember, you have to take the A and the C term coefficients. So I am going to multiply 2 times 2, and my product is 4. So I need two factors of 4 that will give me a sum of 5x. The factors of 4 are 1 and 4, and 2 and 2. If I add 2 plus 2, I'll get 4. I need 5. So those two factors will not be used. 1 and 4, if I add 1 plus 4, I get 5. So the factors that I am going to use in those empty boxes are going to be 1x and 4x. If I add them together, I get 5x. So 2x squared goes in the top left box. 2 goes in the bottom right box. Here again, 2 times 2, that gave me that 4, what I was looking for, the product. But I need a sum of 5x. So 1x and 4x, if I add those two together, I'll end up with 5x. So now it's time to factor out the greatest common factor among the columns and rows. What does 2x squared and 4x both have in common? Well, they both can be divided by 2. And the variables can be divided by x. So my GCF is 2x. What does 1x and 2 have in common? Well, they have nothing in common except for 1. Put it above that column. And since 1x is positive, plus goes between the two terms. Now look at your rows. What does 2x squared and 1x both have in common? Well, they only have x in common. Put it to the right, to the left, excuse me. What does 4x and 2 both have in common? Well, both of them can be divided by 2 evenly. So you put the 2 to the left. And since 4x is positive, plus goes between the 2. So my final answer ends up to be 2x plus 1 times x plus 2. And here again, it does not matter which binomial is written first, but you always need to make sure you check it. Now notice with these problems, my b term and my c term were both plus, and that's why my factors had to be both positive, because I needed a positive sum. And a positive plus a positive is a positive, and a positive times a positive is a positive. Now let's look at a trinomial where instead of b and c being positive, now b and c are different. B is going to be negative and c is going to be positive. So anytime that happens, the two numbers that we are looking for, if c is positive, they both have to be negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive, but a negative plus a negative is a negative. So the two numbers that I need to look at are my a term and my c term. 5 times 14 is 70. So you just multiply 5 times 14 first. That gives me 70. So I need two factors of 70. That gives me a sum of negative 17x. So anytime I have the two factors, I need a positive product. Both of those numbers that I'm looking for have to be negative, because I need a negative sum. So you start going through the factors of 70. 1 and 70. Both of them have to be negative. In this case, the sum is negative 71. I need negative 17. Go to the next one. 2 and 35. Both of them have to be negative. But negative 2 plus negative 35 is negative 37. I need negative 17. So you keep on going through the factors. 3 and some number? No. 4. Can you divide 4 into 70 evenly? And that's what you want to ask yourself. What number times 4 will give me 70? Won't divide evenly. So you keep on going to the next one. 5 and what number? 5 and 14. So you ask yourself, can I ever get 17 out of those two factors by adding a negative 5 plus negative 14? That can't happen, because I get negative 19. So you keep on going. 7. 7 and 10. But they both have to be negative. Negative 7 plus negative 10 is negative 17. There are my two factors. So I'm going to rewrite this in the box. 5x squared goes in the first box. 14 goes in the bottom right box. Negative 7x is in the top right box, and the remaining box will have negative 10x. Here again, negative 7x plus negative 10x is negative 17x. So now we need to factor out the greatest common factor among the rows and the columns. So let's start with the columns. 5x squared and negative 10x both can be divided by 5. It's above the column. And x squared and x can both be divided by x. What does negative 7x and 14 both have in common? Well, both of them can be divided by 7. But since this term right here is negative, I'm going to put minus between the two. Now the rows. What does 5x squared and negative 7x both have in common? They both have x's. Put it to the left. What does negative 10x and 14 have in common? Well, both of those numbers can be divided by 2 evenly. But since this term right here is negative, then a minus is going to go between the two. So my final answer would be 5x minus 7 times x minus 2. And here again, you want to make sure you check the product. 5x times x is 5x squared. Negative 7 times negative 2 is 14. 5x times negative 2 is negative 10x. And negative 7x times negative 7 times x is negative 7x. If I combine these two like terms, I end up with negative 17x. So it checks out. So now it's time for you to try one. Okay, what two numbers would you multiply to give you the number that I'm looking for as far as the two factors? 3 and 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. So I need two factors of 12. That gives me a sum of negative 8x. So start going through the factors of 12. And both of them have to be negative. So let's see, negative 1 and negative 12. Well, negative 1 plus negative 12 is negative 13. That won't help me. Negative 2 and negative 6. Well, negative 2 plus negative 6 is negative 8. There it is. And the other factors of 12 are 3 and 4. Negative 3 and negative 4. But that gives me negative 7, so that won't work. Take 3x squared, put it in the first box. 4 goes in the bottom right box. Negative 2x in that box, and the remaining box is negative 6x. Fact out the greatest common factor among the columns and the rows. So what does 3x squared and negative 6 have in common? That would be 3. And then x squared and x both can be divided by x evenly. What does negative 2x and 4 have in common? That's 2. And since this term is negative, a minus goes between the two. 3x squared and negative 2x, what do they have in common? X, put it to the left. And then negative 2x, negative 6x and 4 both can be divided by 2. But since this term is negative, a minus goes between the two. So my final answer is 3x minus 2 times x minus 2. Now the other pattern we need to look at is when your B term is negative and your C term is negative. But we still have to find that grouping number, which is 3 times negative 5. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. So I need two factors of negative 15. That gives me a sum of negative 2x. Since I need a product that's negative, the two factors that I'm looking for, one has to be negative and the other one has to be positive. But since I need a negative sum, the larger number is going to be negative, the larger number. So the factors of 15 are 1 and negative 15. 15 is the larger number, but if I combine these two, I get negative 14. That can't be it. The next one of 15 would be 3 and 5. 5 is the greater number, so it's going to be a negative. And 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2x. There are my two factors. 3x squared goes in the first box. Negative 5 goes in the bottom right box. 3x in the top right box. And negative 5x in the bottom left. Notice that the diagonals, when you combine those like terms, you'll get the negative 2x. Factor out the greatest common factor among the columns and the rows. 3x squared and negative 5x have x in common. Put it above the column. 3x and negative 5 only have 1 in common. Since 3x is positive, plus goes between the two terms. 3x squared and 3x both have 3 in common and an x. Put it to the left. Negative 5x and negative 5 both have common 5, but since this term is negative, put minus between the two. So my final answer would be x plus 1 and 3x minus 5, written as a binomial and a product. The last problem is just like that, where the middle term is a minus and the last term is a minus. They're both negatives. So you still want two factors of 6 times negative 4, which is negative 24. That gives you a sum of negative 5x. The factors of 24, since I need a negative middle term and a negative product, one of them has to be negative, the other one has to be positive. And since I need a negative sum, the greater number is going to be negative. So go through the factors. 1 and 24 would be negative 24. That gives me negative 23 as a sum, but I need a negative 5x. 2 and 12. If I have 2 and 12, 12 would be negative. That gives me negative 10. I need a negative 5x. 3 and 8. 8 will have to be negative. 3 plus negative 8 is negative 5. There's my two factors. So in the first box is 6x squared. The bottom right is negative 4. The top right is 3x. And the bottom left, negative 8x. Factor out the greatest common factor among the rows and columns. 6x squared and negative 8x both have 2x in common. 3x and negative 4 have nothing but 1 in common. Since 3x is positive, it's going to be plus. 6x squared and 3x both have 3x in common. And negative 8x and negative 4 both have 4 in common. And since negative 8x is negative, that'll be a minus. So now my final answer would be 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 4. Please make sure you view this video as many times as possible to understand the concept. And if you have any questions, please ask your questions in the post section in your Microsoft Teams. Have a good day.